And let's see, they've changed the layout. Okay. And they've changed it just to confuse me. They want me to go live. Now I'm going to go live on YouTube, and it takes about a minute to get that set up. I'm going to call this grandmothers, or not call it grandparents, all right? Grandparents
Yeah.
and climate. And I may change it later. Usually I come up with a snazzier title afterward. It says unable to do YouTube live streaming. Why not? Oh dear.
I can see you're recording it, but
Yeah.
that's showing up on
That's
my,
better than nothing. But
yeah.
this I think is the first time I've ever had that happen with YouTube. And I've done 621 shows. I don't think I've had that happen before. Now, what does that mean? I'm going to say go live again and see what happens. What's it? It's not doing anything. It says it can't. It said it can't. Now, you're going to say it again or not?
Says it's being sent to a
Okay.
third party.
Oh, what's it?
Yeah.
It's not doing anything. It well, here I am. Now, this looks sort of normal. I'm going to say it again. Yeah. All right. I just have to mute myself. That looks normal. Okay.
It says it's now streaming live on YouTube.
Yeah. All right. Well, we will.
Yeah.
All is well.
Yep.
Yes. We'll find out. All right. So let me get started here. Okay. I think we're ready. Hi, I'm Meta Spencer. Today, let's talk to some grandmothers, and let's talk about their concern about the future of their grandchildren, as we certainly all should be. I don't have any grandchildren, but I'm concerned about everybody else's grandchildren, and especially with respect to the threat of global warming. We know what's coming at us, and it's coming fast. So the grandmothers are sticking up for their grandchildren, and I want to talk to two of them today about the organizations that they are engaged in. And both of them are really engaged. And these are two women in the Toronto area who are chair and previous co-chair of something called Grandmothers Act to Save the Planet. And the acronym is lovely, GASP, GASP. So Carol Holmes is currently the co-chair of GASP. And I think you live in Oakville, do you, Carol?
Yes, correct.
Good. And Lorraine Green is the past co-chair of GASP. And where do you live, Lorraine?
I live in Burlington, which is just the next suburb to Oakville.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I know Burlington a little bit. I go on, you go through Burlington to get to, to the next town.
Yes.
And so I want to greet both of you for your activities, and I want to find out more about it. So let's see. I think Lorraine, since you are the past chair, let's start with the past and work up to the present and the future, because I know you have some plans. But let's talk about how this whole thing got started and what your role is in it.
Right. Thank you very much, Meta. Well, I guess now we're going on to almost 5 years ago, 6 years ago, a group of women used to meet regularly to discuss various aspects of social justice. We talked about Indigenous issues. We talked about our about ways we could try and change the world, really. We've been doing work like this for the past 40 years. within our own country and internationally. And Carol decided that we should just go around the room and find out what the topic that was really of most importance to all of us in that room. And 99% of the women there, and we were about 25, I think, at that time, said climate change.
Really? And
Yeah,
that was 5 or 6 years ago already.
right. Yeah, yeah. And I mean, we'd been hearing about it, we'd been talking about it kind of on the fringes a little bit. But when this became the biggest issue for this number of women in that meeting, we decided that we needed to do something about climate change. We needed to do something because it was really us, the boomers, that had caused a lot of the problems we are now seeing today. We caused it, but at that time, we didn't know we were causing it, but we know now, and we need to do something about it now. And most of the women in the room have grandchildren, or like myself, I have 2 great-grandchildren who I love
Really?
dearly, and wanted to make sure that I was doing everything I possibly could to ensure that they would have a world that is livable, that they would have a future seeing this beautiful planet that I've had the opportunity to see and be part of, and to make sure that not just my descendants, but descendants of all the women in the room would have that same opportunity. So that's how GAS came to be formed.
I want to tell you right now, I'm having goose pimples. I'm having a shiver. It just is emotionally extremely impactful to hear
Yeah.
what you're saying, because you're speaking from your heart, and
Yeah.
oh Lord, we need more of that.
Yeah.
Let's go on. I don't want to interrupt you, but just
No,
to
no,
say,
no, no. So,
no,
so,
it's just bringing tears to my eyes. It's so
oh,
beautiful.
sorry, I didn't mean to make it that emotional.
No, I want it's beautiful tears.
So, we set about we didn't even have a name at that time. We set about trying to figure out what we were going to call ourselves, and finally decided on Grandmothers Act to Save the Planet, because grandmothers and grand others is really
Mhm,
what our title is,
mhm,
because we do have a few men and we do have a number of women who are not grandmothers in our group.
mhm.
So we came up with that name, and we even had masks before COVID,
Oh, really?
because that was our branding. Like, we're gasping for
Mhm.
air, for breathing, that was our intention, was to make people sit up and take notice of what was happening in the world. So yeah, the masks came in. They turned out to be quite useful with COVID after all, but that wasn't our intent. you know.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
So yeah, so we started off with that. We were a small group of 25, and we've now grown to 160 members, just about in every
Really?
province. We have members in almost every province across Canada.
Oh, excuse me. Here comes
Yeah,
Janet Hudgens. I don't want to interrupt you, but it's good that we have another panelist arriving.
yeah, that's great.
Excellent. Hello, Janet Hudgens. I'll come back to you in a minute, Lorraine.
Yeah, no problem.
Hello, Janet. Can you hear me? Hello. Can you hear me? Unmute yourself, Janet. Unmute yourself. Hello.
Sorry,
Oh, all right.
No?
life is bound to happen somehow when you don't want.
Well, I'm able, fortunately, to edit out anything I don't like, and as a matter of fact, I will, because we've already started, and I want to have you sort of present from the beginning. Can you move your camera a little bit so we can see your full face?
Oh,
And by the way, Lorraine, if there's a
There you go.
way, while you're at it, we're making this break, Lorraine. is there a way to change the lighting a little bit so we get more light on your face and less on the background? Is that easy? If there's an easy way to do it, if you have a lamp there or something,
Yeah, I
that
can try it.
would be enough. If you don't worry about it. It's okay. It's just not great. There, that's better. Uh-huh.
Better.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah. And then make the camera down a little bit, a tad, and there we go. All right, fine. Thank you, Janet. I'm glad you got my message and are willing to play with us today. Our other two panelists are Carol Holmes and Lorraine Green, who are both presently, Carol is a current co-chair of GASP, Grandmothers, let me see if Act to Save the Planet, GASP. And Janet, let me get started with you, introducing you, and then I'm going to move some stuff around a little bit. At the end, I can edit this so that you appear with the same people at the same time. Janet Hudgens, you are in Halifax, I believe, right?
Yes, right.
Good. And can you say what organization you are representing? I think it's a new one, isn't it?
Well, it came out of the Suzuki Elders, and the council which I belonged to for decades, and and what this is called is Seniors for Climate.
Seniors for Climate. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And our objective, of course, is to well, different people are doing different things in the country. It's across the country. 52 groups, I think, and I forget how many hundred people. And,
52. Uh-huh.
Yeah, and I have decided that I want to get kids, public schools to add climate change to their curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
And the kids are really keen on this, I hear, and now I'm trying to find the right people to make this work. It's apparently kind of dicey, and to find the right ticket to get it started is proving to take some time.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's exactly what we're going to be doing with this project, is putting groups and individuals together who can find ways of working together and supporting each other. So we need to get acquainted, and this is the first step in that way. Okay. And by the way, if you can tilt your camera a little bit so we can see your full face a little more, that'd be good.
It's a desktop. It's about the best I can do.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, fine. Lorraine, please pick up where I interrupted you. You were telling us about the founding of GASP, and that was what you say about 5 years ago?
Yeah, in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
And just as an aside, before we go on with that, Janet, you might like to know that GASP is one of the major sponsors for Seniors for Climate. And all across the country, there will be a big demonstration on October the 1st, calling all seniors to come out and speak up for the climate, for our children, for the world. So yeah, we know what you're facing. So back to GASP. So after our first meeting, and once we settled on our name, we started to break off into different groups. Members would bring ideas forward. We work very much with a consensus model, as I think a lot of women's groups do. As members were interested in certain issues related to climate or the environment, we would get together and look at that particular issue and decide if it was something that GASP wanted to take up. And as a result, we now have 7 or 8 different committees. We have an education committee, a bank committee, a basic income committee, Ontario Watch, which is probably a little bit unusual maybe for other provinces, but we are not very pleased with our present premier and his actions on the environment. So we formed a specific group just to follow those actions and to take up issues that we are not happy with, certain bills that he passes. We have a banks team, a pension team, a health team. I think that's it. Did I leave anybody out, Carol?
Just transition
Oh, just transition,
and
right?
basic income.
Basic income, yeah. So we have a number of teams. There's a chair for each of these teams, and there are members that who feel they have, you know, a real calling to work in that particular team, who have joined. And we write letters, we sign petitions, we meet with politicians at the federal, the provincial, and the municipal level. So we're a pretty busy group. And I think I mentioned we are now up to about 160 members. Hopefully we will continue to grow because things are not happening fast enough. And we have real concern that you know, later is too late, and we need to keep pushing our politicians to do something faster and stop all the various subsidies and
Mhm.
free passes that are being given to so many of our oil and gas companies and our banks. So I don't know if that brings you up to date to where we are now,
That's
but
wonderful, because all of those, the thing I'm hearing and delighted to hear is that you're really broad. You're not just talking about turning out the light bulbs, when you leave the room. You're talking about social policies that all impact on the viability of possible ways of reducing climate change. So that broad perspective, I think, is exciting to me, that what all has to, I mean, it's got to be a big, big project that's got to cover just everything in society. I think all three of you really do agree on that. I presume Janet too. Right, Janet?
To
On-
what?
On the breadth of the importance of what she's described as a very broad project,
Yes, yeah.
even including things like basic income. My goodness, that really wouldn't have even occurred to me to count that as a, let me see, because I want to move on to Carol now.
Oh.
Carol is a current co-chair of GASP. And let me start with that very one question. You've brought in a topic that would not normally be considered part of the agenda for climate repair or climate action interventions. How do you explain it to people? Why it's a good thing to talk about guaranteed basic income as a means of climate action?
Well, when we were thinking of just transition and we were thinking of what was involved in just transition, and the focus was on people who lost their jobs in fossil fuel, that seemed to be the focus. We had a broader focus, and that was society in general, and that there were so many fast growing injustices, the imbalances of money, imbalance, people left behind. It wasn't just going to be the people losing their job in oil and gas. It was going to be the impact of climate was going to affect everyone, rich, but especially the poor, especially the more marginalized people. And we thought, well, if we are going to transition, part of that transition has to be fairness, and it has to give a certain amount of security to everyone. Because we were looking at the divisions that were happening. We were looking at people moving to the right, moving to more authoritarian, more to, extreme right. And that was quite frightening to us. But when we looked at it, it was because of people's fear and insecurity. And we thought, well, without some basic able to have house, food, and security, it was going to move people into the more radical right leaning politics.
Mm.
So that, and because we cared about systems, right from the beginning, we wanted to deal with system change. You know, you were right about the light bulb and right about the recycling. Yes, we were doing that in our personal lives, but what motivated GASP, these women, was systems change. And part of that system change was some support for the insecurity that was happening and basic income. We started studying it. We found even people in the conservative parties interested in it.
Mm.
Mind you, they were some of the older conservatives. But they liked the idea that if you had people that felt a certain security, they wouldn't be protesting and moving to a more authoritarian kind of politics. So that really put us in a very important position, because we had to decide right there and then, because we've been nonpartisan all along. And that right now, for the moment, at this moment, is pushing us towards dropping that. I had fought very hard. Lorraine will tell you from the very beginning, I was the original co-chair with Lorraine. And we fought to stay nonpartisan because we wanted to have communications with conservatives that we did have at the time. One conservative very supportive of carbon tax, that was Michael Chung, and he was in our area. And so we wanted to stay nonpartisan because that allowed us to speak. But the pressure right now from our members is the time is too urgent. It is too urgent. And we're not a formal charity. We're just a volunteer group. And we're not tied to being nonpartisan, and that's being challenged right now to say if this is too urgent, climate change is too important, and both our potential federal government and our existing provincial government are definite anti-climate. They're climate deniers. They do not want to have a climate plan. And that is challenging our very essence of nonpartisanship.
Well,
Sorry, I
that
didn't mean
is
to
very,
throw in one of our challenges, but
that's a hugely, provocative introduction. And I want to give Janet a chance to comment on that, because I wonder how widespread that position is. I am, created this thing called Project Save the World, which is, of course, well, we are certainly nonpartisan, because it never even occurred to us that we could be, or that there was any place for partisan politics in what we do. So you've already leaped past some logical obstacles that would have inhibited us, and still will. I'm quite sure we'll never be a partisan outfit, but even your use of the concept of just transition is a I would say sort of left of center kind of notion, because right there, that is a slogan for people who want significant institutional changes in the economies, right? And just transition, I think, is not just a technological thing. Why don't you explain that concept? One of our board of directors, John Pfeffer, is the editor of something called Foreign Policy in Focus, which is the publication of the Institute for Policy Studies in Washington, which I think is probably the best think tank anywhere. And he is running a program called Just Transitions. But I think we never even discussed the concept. Would you explain that concept first before we ask Janet what her views are?
the concept of just transition,
Mhm.
is that what you're asking?
It's a more than a concept. I think it is a slogan, or a it has a certain specific meaning of, it's a program, a global program. I think people all over the world are talking about making a just transition to basically a sustainable economy, and what that means may not be the same for everyone. It involves a question of whether or not you can decouple economic growth, for example, from from climate sustainability issues.
Yes.
And that is, I think, always a controversial question, but it's part of the discourse in the discussion of just transition. Just give us a heads up about where you got that
Well,
slogan.
Well, I think the slogan is in the climate environment, and as I said earlier, it's fairly narrow because it was focused primarily on the people losing jobs. If we transition to renewable, we're losing jobs, and we have to make sure that those workers are supported. And we agree with that, but it was much broader than that, and it was about an economic situation. And there's another concept that's very much part of our group, and that is that climate is a collective problem, and it's only going to be solved with a certain collaboration and collectiveness in solving the problem. And so we're saying, just looking at those jobs, it's not enough. And it's not enough to just say we have wonderful new renewable jobs, and we do. If we're still in this situation of inequality, of economic inequality, of opportunity equality, that that this is an opportunity for us to give poorer people a more level playing field. Instead of letting them who will suffer the most. Our poorest country, our marginalized people will definitely suffer more in climate change. They're living in poorer areas, they're in flood areas, their housing is not fireproof, all of those things and many of them are the least likely to have contributed. So you're going to putting all the pressure on the least able to support. And we're saying we're just going to go ahead and fix this. But, it's not going to be fixed. That sort of insecurity of that bottom group, of that poorer group, unless you address some of that insecurity that's there and inequality.
Okay, now you actually are you have committees that you do things.
Yes.
To give me some, events, recent events that you have done. You've organized meetings, protests, visits to parliamentarians.
Yes.
What have you been doing?
Okay, I can give you several. I can start with our banks. We've been working with the senators because there's a bank on financial. We're very concerned with how much money is in the banks. We're very concerned with how much money of our pensions are going to climate destruction, if you want, and we can't seem to do much in terms of divesting. One of the things we have done is we were proxy shareholders in the RBC. We handed our proxies for voting for the annual general meeting to Indigenous people so they could speak about their situation in shareholders at the annual general meeting. So that's one specific action. But we are also
happen?
Yes.
How did it go? What
Whoa,
kind of
very difficult. I did this for my third year, but the second year, they put all the Indigenous people in a separate room, and they weren't treated the same way as the other shareholders were to speak. And this year they were able to speak, but the head of the RBC Bank was
very rude.
Not cool, more than negative.
Very rude, Carol.
So that was just one act, but we have other, our pension, we're working with retired teachers because many of them are shocked at what they're funding. They thought they were just funding casinos. They thought they were just funding, they knew there were things they didn't like, mining and so on. But when they found how much of their money is going into fossil fuels, many of them very concerned. And it's very concerning because it's their very livelihood. It's their pensions. Hard to fight, but they're doing it. That's just one example. But we do rallies. We've held Harvest Ontario Walk because we're very concerned about the green belt, and we're very concerned about a brand new unnecessary highway that's coming north of Toronto. And so we've been very involved in organizing walks in the fall, and we're having another one coming up. We're going to be doing more work. This one, healthcare, not highways. So we support other people's initiatives. So right now there's issues in healthcare. So we will join healthcare groups as grandmothers acting to save the planet. So we go in our own unit, we have our back,
Mhm.
our signs, and sometimes our green masks,
Yes.
our props, to say grandmothers, we have a voice here, and we're going to keep talking.
Oh boy, well, you're really thrilling me because I am ashamed to say I didn't know about you. And here we live in the same vicinity. I could have known about you years ago and didn't. So now shame on me. I'll work on this. Make sure we don't lose touch. Janet, tell us what you've been listening to all this. How does this square with what you're up to or the what's already been going on in the group that you're with?
Well, I admire you for taking on so many aspects of this to get it done. I'm very conscious of time, I suppose, but there is so much going on in our Seniors for Climate. There's a huge amount going on, all kinds of situations in umpteen different parts of the country. Whatever they get going that works, I suppose. I'm trying not to take on more than I can handle and get done thoroughly. That's why I've narrowed it down to public schools on the one hand, on the other, if I can, to do what David Suzuki calls calling out politicians. And in my view, for what, not just what they didn't do to mitigate it, but everything to exacerbate it with what is said to be over $1 trillion of our tax money since 1980. And by practicing neoliberalism, abandoning.
Wait a minute, hold on. $1 trillion has gone into what? I don't know. I hadn't heard about that.
Fossil fuels.
Yeah, okay. Is that like subsidies or how would you call that into, is that direct support or use of, how has it gone into fossil fuels? How does my dollar go into some company?
Well, it goes from the government directly to various levels of fossil fuels, and it's buried. It's very difficult to find, but
Yeah.
it goes in billions every year.
Do they call it, here's a subsidy, go have fun, or how do they label this? What kind of accounting system would allow them to take my dollar and give it to some company that is doing things I don't like? How do they get away with it? And what kind of language do the accountants use or the auditors use to explain how they're subsidizing or supporting fossil fuels? You know, I don't know this.
Lobbyists ask for it and they get it. Lobbyists spend a great deal of time, 5 days and nights a week in Ottawa.
Yeah.
And the majority of them are in the fossil fuel business. And governments, all of them. We also, by the way, Trudeau bought an oil company, a fuel company. I think we still own it. All of that
So
attention.
I know about the pipeline. Well, I don't know much about it. I haven't followed it closely, but yes, Canada bought a big pipeline.
Yeah.
And that must be a big chunk of that money, right? Because that can't have been cheap. You don't buy pipelines easily.
No, I forget what it was. It was a huge amount. Yeah.
It was $14 million.
Was it?
$14 billion, sorry.
Billion.
Yeah.
Billion. That's more than I have in my piggy bank.
Yes.
I just want to add to the subsidies. The subsidies are usually asked. The company says, we're needing it to help to convert our, whatever the new technology is, which is carbon capture now. So we need, we've got technical solutions to this. We can capture the carbon, but we need money for that. And so our government has given subsidies for specific projects like that. The government has covered projects to clean up the mess in very polluted areas. You know, so it sometimes given in tax breaks, for instance, to do certain things to help them convert. So it's not just handing over the money to do what they want, even though I think sometimes they do. I think it's got specific targeting things. Now, some people feel putting money into technological solutions to climate change, it's too late. Very
Well, I guess what I'm
costly.
thinking is I hear this, the term ending fossil fuel subsidies. And that to me sounds like that would handle everything. But what I guess I'm wondering is whether if they cut off what are technically called subsidies, would that take care of everything that Janet has been referring to?
No,
No?
not even the, it's a very small portion of it. You know, we've got 5 major banks in our country. All 5 major banks are lending money to fossil fuel projects, to fossil fuel companies in the billions of dollars. Our number 1 bank, RBC, was the number 1 bank in the world, not just in Canada, but in the world, to support fossil fuel projects. So, you know, it's not just our government, it's our banks, it's our pension funds, it's all the other things that account for money going into fossil fuels. And until we can stop that, I mean, there is a certain amount of blame on our government, but they don't account for all of it. We have to get the fossil fuel companies to stop digging and drilling for oil and gas and coal. That's the bottom line, you know.
And what happens if you succeeded tomorrow and got all of these advantages cut off so that the prospecting for fossil fuels stopped immediately? What would happen to the economy? Is there a rationale? Is there a basic good reasoning behind the notion, well, you can't just do it all at once? Because in fact, we haven't been doing it. It's, if anything, you know, the emissions from greenhouse gases increased, not decreased. So we're going downhill. We're getting worse off fast. We're not making much, if any, progress. Well, maybe a little, but probably not enough. But the explanation they give is, well, the economy requires this. It can't be done that quickly. Well, it's true. If you don't have any gas to put in your car, then a lot of things are going to not happen that would be economically advantageous, like you can't go to work or can't go to the grocery store or something. But what, I mean, are you looking at the big picture of what would happen to the entire economy if we were very much more rapid in making these transitions?
Well, my view that we have not highlighted how incredibly fabulous is the rise in renewables. It has been faster than anybody thought. It has been cheaper than anybody else thought. Everybody can do it. It's renewable. And if we did a big, huge push as a collective, as a country, as a world on renewables, we would have lots of jobs. We would have a lot less. But of course, you're not going to stop oil and gas tomorrow, but it can be legislated. It is peak. We're at peak oil, or we're past peak oil. It is going to die. Some of it want us to die fast. And by having regulations, that's going to make it more difficult. And stopping subsidies, that's going to make it more difficult, but it won't stop them exactly. I mean, our tobacco companies are still making cigarettes. And so it's going to be, you know, slow. It's not going to be as fast as we like, but a robust, renewable situation, it's there. They're fighting against it, you know, like Alberta, our Alberta, you know.
Yeah. Okay, Janet, is everything they've said compatible with what your organization is hoping to do or actually accomplishing? Or do you find there's any disparity between your ambitions?
No, they're just doing more than I am.
Uh,
I'm very old and conscious of time,
Yeah.
and so I try to focus and stick with it.
Yeah.
Everything that and both ladies have talked about is certainly we are fully aware of all of those, and a lot of people are doing things just like you're talking about in different parts of the country. I just happen to be focused on something else, but for the same reason.
Now
All
you
for the-
say, excuse me, but you just recently or sometime not too long ago moved to Halifax from Vancouver, is that right?
Right.
And you were
From
there
one
in
end to the other.
sorry?
From one end of the country to the other.
Aye. And you carried your politics with you, it sounds like.
Oh yeah, I've been a cause fighter all my life. This Seniors for Climate started before I knew about it. I was busy moving. It started last year, but they only caught up with me a few months ago. Found me, I guess. And so I haven't been working at it as long as I would like to have. And now I'm concerned because I would like to be doing something sooner than October the 1st, in the run up to the fall term and school term.
Uh-huh.
So I'm really looking for teachers to talk to,
Uh-huh.
because the work falls on their shoulders and they know the ropes. And I'm hoping that a few people have said they will come forward and are interested. So I'm hoping to get something started fairly soon.
Okay,
just-
now you mentioned something that GASP did not mention, that is trying to promote climate education in the schools. Well, very big question. GASP, what's your position on that?
Well, we're very, very supportive. And in fact, our very first action was when Greta Thunberg said, "You boomers, it's your fault." And she started the Fridays for the Future. We had GASP that went walking with the students. And at first we thought, oh, they're not going to like us. They're going to say, oh, you're the enemy. And you know, they welcomed us. And just recently I saw a stat that said that on climate change, people over 65 and people under 29, so those two groups are the most likely to support climate change.
Mm.
So
Oh.
that's students and grandma or grannies or grandparents, the two groups more concerned and wanting something to do it. But the middle people are too busy just living their life.
Okay, is this global or not? I mean, you quoted a number that I never heard before, but that's wonderful. And who are they talking about? Is this worldwide that there's this gap? Middle-aged people are the
No, I don't think it was worldwide, but I think it was North America, because I think it was US and Canada. But you know what? I will look it up. I don't have it, but it was just last week that I saw that stat. It was quite amazing. They had done a study on attitudes towards climate. And there we were, the old people and the young people together.
Yeah.
But yes, I think it's a wonderful goal, Janet, and you're so right in working on one project. That's why we have different groups. It's because some people are passionate about certain issues. So, you know, so they go and they develop the expertise, they develop the knowledge and what actions we should take, and they only have to study one aspect. So I support you going that with education. Go for it.
Thank you, I will.
Now, what I'm wondering is how to help either of you or all of you, because I'm going to be doing a whole year of these shows. I normally do one every week about climate, at least about climate, and then I do usually some other about something else. So I've been doing for the last, I've got 35 shows in the sequence that I'm working on now called Cool Thinking, which is a discussion primarily about the different technological solutions that are proposed to help cool the Arctic, because that is the most serious threat if, because of the albedo effect of the ice and so on. Once the Arctic is warm, it's pretty hard to make any other changes, and everything else is going downhill fast if we do that. So I've been looking at that, but now that will be over in about September. And I want to do a series in which I bring together people from very different communities of discourse, let's call it that way. I would say seniors about climate, let's call that one community of discourse. There would be another one, let's say, of the young people. The young people clearly do not come to your meetings, but they have their own things, and you maybe talk to each other, maybe you don't. Then we have the communities of indigenous discourse, the people who belong to groups that have local, especially people who have some in the north have local effects on their livelihood of and their way of life. And then there are people, well, why not bring in some of these folks from your bank? The guys who didn't want to let you talk, bring them here and make them talk to you here. Talk about this, have a conversation. If I can get hold of some bankers or the corporate, people in the energy business. Why don't I see if I can get hold of some executives who believe they ought to be buying pipelines and doing this stuff? Bring them in. Let's have a conversation. You willing to do it?
It's going to be hard, Meta. Some of
I
us are
know.
married to them. I'm married to a Shell Oil executive. Lorraine has 25 years in the RBC Bank. So but you know what? It'd be fabulous if you could get some, because I think there are people in that industry who aren't quite comfortable with what's happening there. But will they talk? I don't know if you will get people to speak.
We've
I
tried.
say go for it, try it.
Try it, because we have tried to get banks to talk to us. I mean, written
At
letters.
first they did, Lorraine, remember?
They did, and then now they've closed us completely down. They know what we're about, so they don't want to talk to us anymore.
The human resources people were open, middle management, environmental people within the RBC, and we met with them, sort of middle management, and then they went, oh, you see, we sent them postcards of grandkids and saying, are you thinking about them in your job? They didn't like
Not
the,
so much. They didn't like it too much. So I mean,
we
we
sent
keep
them a
doing
pile of
yeah.
like that.
We keep doing demonstration in front of branches, and Carol's right. There has to be, the only thing we can see right now that's going to affect any kind of change with banks and pensions is legislation. And right
Regulation.
now we are supporting, there's Senator Rosa Galvez has put forward a bill for a climate finance act that she wants to have it become law, and it would it would make it necessary for all banks to report on their commitments or their support of fossil fuel companies. They would have to be transparent. They would have to indicate how much pollution and their support of this particular project would end up causing, not just in Canada, but in the world, because we have a very bad record of counting our actual pollution levels here in this country. Whatever we export, we don't count that because, it's going to another country. That's not right. So, but anyways, we are 100% behind Senator Galvez. We have presented a brief to the Senate committee. We hope that eventually we will get to speak at the Senate committee, and we are writing to all our politicians, telling them when this bill comes up for second and third reading, that they must support it. It's the only way we can force banks and pension funds to come together and to ensure that Canada meets its target goals.
Mhm.
And that may have to be what happens to the rest of the fossil fuel companies. I don't know, you know,
Meta, you know, Rosa Galvez would be a fabulous interview grandmother.
yeah.
She's brilliant in every way.
Thank you. You keep, you write all this down and send it to me, and boy, I'll get right on to that. I do have a lot of organizing to do, and of course, I will do my best to get. I'm taking your advice, but I will do my best to get some people who belong to different. I call them different communities of discourse, but I don't want to set up a debate. I
No.
don't believe that debates are as helpful as efforts to find, is there any common ground? Now, you may find that you have almost nothing in common with these people, but if you can find some area in which you might agree on anything, that may give us a little stepping stone in the right direction. Whereas to me, using the opportunities that this presents to set up debates usually kind of locks people even more firmly into their positions. And I
Yeah.
want to get them off their positions,
Yeah.
if possible. So, and another community that I would think would be the teachers, because what's it going to mean if the teacher gets a directive from, I don't know, from the principal or the superintendent of schools in her district or something, saying, now we're going to have a unit on climate change in your 6th grade. Whoa, how's she going to, or he going to get ready for that? What kind of preparation and what kind of resources, what kind of, even what content do you present? Do you ask them to give all the rationales that people who are non-believers, deniers of climate change, do you include that in the conversation? What do you do? How that's a whole different consideration. So I want to have conversations about each of these between representatives of each of these groups as they consider some. And I made a list of 20 different issues that are relevant to climate change. And I can use those 20 as a jumping off point, but there will be other issues that we need to. But each show, each forum will be on a particular topic. It could be, for example, should schools be required to have climate change instruction in public schools? That would be one that I would like to bring the teachers and Janet together with. Is that okay with you, Janet?
Well, there are a few teachers who have taken it on themselves, who are well schooled in it, but there are just a few. My expert in the field is my great grandson, who tells me he's a teenager in what I would have called junior high school, I think, and he says the subject's never been brought up, and that applies, I think, to the vast majority. But I found 15 sites online that are in support of this, one way or another. So, one group that's teaching it said it's not hard. The room goes quiet, and so it's almost there for the scooping up and get on with it. Just how to do it, how to approach, whether to. There's a group that tried to. Did I say this before? Tried to. Go directly to a school, ask the principal and the vice principal, and they flatly turned it down. And so working through the system, I think I'm very sure is what I need to do, and to find the right people to help me with that.
You share your list of contacts with me as you talk to different teachers, for example, especially those who are on your side and working on the same toward the same goals. I'm gonna need all of the contacts that I can get in Canada, but even globally. I expect to bring together Indigenous people, not just in Canada, but in the Sami in Scandinavia. I understand that there are Indigenous communities in Australia that live close to the Great Barrier Reef, and they are very enthusiastic about the use of marine cloud brightening to try to save the Great Barrier Reef. I want to bring them in on those conversations. And so we'll have a mixture of different groups from different sources who don't normally have any reason to talk to each other, but talking about specific questions. And so if you can, as you learn more about these other people, if you can share them with me and tell me where to go, who's promising to invite,
Good.
then I'll work on that.
You mean you want the links of those people in that I'm working with is in Nova, they're in Nova, most of them are in Nova Scotia. That's what you're looking for?
Well, I found you in Nova Scotia, but I found there's another person out in Vancouver that that Carol put me in touch with. So and then there are a lot of people in Peterborough. Apparently, they're doing things on a big scale. So,
so
but
I
nobody's
misunderstood.
answering their phones.
Not
That's
getting
the
it right
problem.
then. That's not what, you don't want the links to people working in it. You want the people like me who are working in this field. Is that
I
it?
want people like you who are working on this field and anybody else who thinks that you're full of
Okay.
baloney. Because I don't mind having disagreements. I'm not going to set up a debate to try to elicit disagreements, but I expect that there will be some because we're going to bring together, if possible, I want to bring bank.
I don't know of anyone
executives.
else who's doing what I'm doing.
Okay. You know about folks out in the Suzuki land.
But they're doing different things than I am.
All right, okay.
I
Well,
haven't
whatever
heard of
you,
anyone else.
any of them that if you come across somebody,
Yeah, sure.
the teachers, for example,
Yeah, sure.
let me know and
Yeah.
I'll try to put them together, okay?
Okay. Yeah, sure.
All right.
We haven't, we haven't mentioned health.
Yes,
And when you talk about children, you are talking about eco-anxiety. And Jackie, you said that when it's presented in class, there's absolute quiet.
Hmm.
And what happens there is a certain amount of anxiety, and our children, whether we have it in school or not, they know about climate change.
Right. And the trauma.
Absolutely know about climate change, and they are anxious. My own granddaughter right here, 18, second year at environmental science in Santa Cruz University, has been anxious about climate since grade 6. When she came home and she said, about the bees, the pesticide is killing the bees, and they are our pollinators, and they pollinate our flowers, and that's our food. And you know what? The whole world could die if we keep killing the bees. Grade 6 or 7. It's there.
We've had the fires here. Nothing like BC nor the floods that they've had. But we've had the fires and people have lost everything. And those children that were in that situation have not, as far as I know, sought help or nor has anybody offered. They are not equipped. Nobody's given them the equipment. No one expected this, and they didn't give them the equipment to work with. And that's another aspect of the getting it into schools.
You mean buying physical equipment to preserve the classrooms?
No, probably mental health requirements, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing you have to be mindful of in the schools, especially with environmental curriculum, there is some mention in our schools in Ontario, there is some mention of the environment in our schools, but a lot of the studies, the curriculum is being funded by banks, fossil fuels, tobacco companies. So, you're coming up against these big spenders, these big foundations, these big corporations, and they push back. Because we tried to get into a number of schools. We asked questions about certain curriculum that was being taught in schools. And we got told in no uncertain terms, The school did not have this funding. They could not do not even just environmental studies, but lots of other activities as well. So, you know, there's all these layers that you will probably come up against, Janet.
Yeah.
So
And the men in these companies have an attitude toward women
yes,
that is very disagreeable.
yeah.
Oh, boy. Well, we got our agenda and then I should also
Got
tell
your
you,
work cut out for you, Meta.
yeah, that's the fun of it. I mean, really, it is. It is a huge, you know, I'm going to be 93 in a couple of weeks. And this is the most, almost the most fun I ever had in my life.
Oh,
I've never had such a pleasure, such a wonderful social life, getting to know people like you that I wouldn't have met. And every week I meet some new folks and they're all terrific. So I'm going to even look for some people who are not so terrific.
but I'm sure you will find something good about them. And
Well,
I think that's where your
have
conversations come about, you know?
I have a very interesting contact of a man who was an executive in an energy company. He built power plants in Russia. And
Oh.
he left Russia to keep from being sent to Ukraine to kill Ukrainians. And he's in touch with a lot of other people in his former career who are executives in the energy business. Most of them are not going to talk to me, but he's found some that are outside the country, like himself, who left and who feel free. Now I want to have a conversation with what are they talking about in the back rooms? What do they say? Because the Russian government acts as if it's really in denial, you know. I mean, they want to sell and use as much oil and gas as they can because that makes them richer and they require that for the government income. So what do the energy people say? The energy people actually know that their days are numbered, you know, that these companies are not going to be producing this stuff that much longer. So what are their plans? I want to hear that. And I want to bring them together with you. And they're, you know, so I'll be okay. Or with Lorraine's husband.
You might want, our government recently held committee meetings where they asked very nicely at first, all of the heads of all of the oil companies to meet with them to talk about environment. Their first invitation was ignored and none of the CEOs of the oil companies agreed to meet with them. Their second request came as not an invitation, but you must attend this meeting. And they did. They were requested to meet in person, but they refused and they did the conversation over Zoom. But you should look that up, Meta. It's quite a good conversation. It's the Standing Committee on Environment for Canada. All of the CEOs of the major oil companies were there, and their comments were shocking. Our federal government did the same with the CEOs of all our 5 major banks at another meeting. Again, they refused to come to the meeting originally. And then they were not requested. They were told they needed to come to this meeting. And they did, again, via Zoom. And once again, evaded the questions, did not want to talk about their position on climate crisis. And they were very evasive. So it's another really great recording to look into to give you some idea of what the CEOs of the fossil fuel companies and what the CEO of the major banks are thinking and what their plans are for the future. Doesn't really.
If you have links to any of those things, would you send them to me?
I can send those to you.
Okay. Thank you.
We were quite upset.
Lorraine is in our bank team. You can tell, very knowledgeable. Each of our team leaders are amazingly knowledgeable.
Well, I just am so thrilled to have met you. because you're now my resource. I got you in my back pocket.
Okay.
And I will be calling you for sure, again and again. So thank you very much. And maybe we can even meet in person one day. Who knows? I don't go out, but at least Zoom, but Zoom really does a good job, don't you think? I mean,
Yeah.
we can do as well with Zoom as we would if we'd met.
Where
So
are you
thank you.
located, Meta? Where are you?
I'm near the Allen Road in North York.
Oh, okay,
yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
great.
Well,
Okay,
thank
let's
you,
start.
Meta. You're doing good work. I just want to
Yes.
say you're doing wonderful
Thank
work.
you.
Keep up this conversation.
Well, I have, if you look at that, our website, to savetheworld.ca, you'll see a scroll window with 621, this will be number 622, forums, episodes. And they're all on different social issues, all global threats to humankind. And we have 1 hour long conversations that I edit them and put them up there, and they're there forever. But we don't get as much traffic as we'd like. I
Mm.
don't have the money for a big publicity campaign, but you might want to share this to your own members and say that if they want to learn about some of these aspects of global warming, I've got probably well over 100 conversations about climate in the series. I don't know whether I've got 200, but I've got more than 100, and they're each, most of them with experts, the leading global experts on various aspects of climate repair. So have a look, and I'll be delighted if anybody wants to share them. Good. Bless
Great.
your hearts. Well, we've used up our time and then some, and it's been fun, and I'll be back in touch with you. So thank you all
Thank you.
very much.
Nice meeting
Thank
you.
you, Meta. Nice to meet
Yeah.
you. Nice to meet you, Janet.
Fine.
Lovely
Bye.
to meet you all. Yes.